Good morning and welcome to the nonStatic podcast where we explore how to keep moving forward when motivation feels distant. Here we dive into finding peace and fulfillment in a busy world, discovering how to embrace life's opportunities to live with purpose and joy. I am John, and this is my brother, Dr. Josh.
Morning.
Josh is the creator of nonStatic, and we're here to just shoot the breeze, see what happens, see what comes of this.
And talk about nothing relevant.
Yeah. So, how was your weekend, Josh?
It was Mother's Day, so we celebrated the moms on Sunday.
We sure did.
So that was nice. And now we don't need to honor moms the rest of the year. Just that one day.
Just one day a year. That's all we need, right? To
Right.
say, hey, thanks, Mom, for birthing us and for raising us and all this stuff, and for us, our wives, thank you for raising our kids. And then now, you're right. Now we don't need to do that again until next year.
I always thought Mother's Day seemed so inadequate. To be honest,
It really is.
It always seemed very inadequate.
I had a Saturday. Amanda had to go be with her family for the day, as they were going through some stuff, and so I was hanging out with the kids all.
You had to babysit your kids.
I had to babysit my own children. That'll get some
people wrong. Yeah, get people wound up. Can't wait to see the comments on that.
Right. No, it was a lot of fun. We went fishing. We went fishing, and then we hung out at home, played, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't anything spectacular. It wasn't anything like out of this world intense, but I'm just not built to be a stay-at-home mom.
It's kind of a stay-at-home parent, maybe.
Or Mr. Mom or whatever. I'm just not built that way.
You're always on.
You're always on. You don't have a break. And I think a lot of it has to do with the age of our kids, because we're 8, 6, and 2, just super high energy, super full of wonder, that kind of thing, and they never want to be bored.
Right.
And so I kind of felt like I got to make sure that they stay entertained. But then, I got to thinking that, being bored actually isn't necessarily the bad thing for the kids. And yes, that was a little sneaky segue into this.
Yes. But, when kids are bored, what's funny is if you observe kids and they say that they're bored and you just kind of let them be, I think sometimes we as parents want to swoop in and stop the boredom from happening.
Right.
But if you observe any child, when they get bored and you just kind of let them sit in that boredom, they'll inevitably find something to do.
Right.
But if you are constantly trying to stop the boredom from happening, it kind of doesn't allow them to be creative. That's really where kids get all their imagination. During those times when they're bored and there's nothing to do, and they have to create their own excitement.
We don't like to be bored at all.
No, we don't.
When
was the last time you were truly bored? Now, when I say bored, I mean no phone, nothing.
Gosh, the one I always remember, I'm sure I was bored before after this, but I remember when we lived in Lakeville and I was a little kid. I was probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, around that age. And it was a summer. I'm so bored, had nothing to do. And honestly, I just ended up following ants around.
You followed ants around.
Yeah, and it ended up being really fascinating. I was watching ants build their fortress, and then I would just kind of just kind of topple it over, and then I would watch them rebuild their fortress, their little mound that I would destroy, and it would take a while. It would take a long time, but I was fascinated.
You're a closet psychopath. You destroying their fort and then just to watch them rebuild it.
It was terrible. So much fun. Yeah, I wanted to see how efficient they were, and they were really efficient. And then I'd go climbing trees and stuff, and sure, those days would take forever, but man, what I wouldn't give for a day like that.
Yeah,
again,
we kind of take that for granted.
Those
especially
are the days.
I think it's always going to be there.
I tell the girls whenever they're bored, I said, "Hey, enjoy this.
Mm-hmm. Enjoy being bored.
Enjoy being bored because there's so many things for you to do, and you don't want to do any of them."
Yeah, Well, and the thing with boredom, in today's society, we're never allowed to be bored anymore. You just look at what we have access to.
Right.
For example, when was the last time you were stuck in line, with absolutely nothing to do? And the fact is, probably never. It's probably been a very long time, because if you're stuck in line waiting for something at a grocery store or the return line at Kohl's or wherever it may be. What's the first thing you see people do? You pull out their phone and look at something,
they're
right?
looking at the ground.
And I
Yeah.
do it too, of course. But we're conditioned now to always need some kind of stimulation, whether it's scrolling, checking emails, checking our schedules, scrolling Facebook, scrolling Instagram, checking TikToks, or even a podcast. It's very rare that,
Except for nonStatic.
right, correct. That should always be on.
That should always be on top of your mind. Always should
Right.
be checking that out.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's very rare that we just allow ourselves to exist with just our thoughts and nothing else
Yeah.
driving them, But what I would argue is that boredom really isn't a problem. We a lot of times see boredom as something that we don't want, but really what boredom is, it's a feature of a healthy creative brain, and I'll tell you why. We're going to talk a little bit about why boredom is disappearing, and then why it's important to also bring it back. And if we're not bored, the research has shown that people that don't allow themselves to be bored, meaning without having any stimulation, electronically or otherwise, it actually increases burnout. It results in a lack of decreased creativity in our work, as well as emotional fatigue. And then, not surprisingly, the lack of boredom often leads to overstimulation. So we're constantly looking at our phones, constantly have our eyes on looking at a screen. It's important that we kind of build in boredom into our lives at some point.
So let me ask you this. As you know, I got a new shed, and so
You did get a new shed.
I
I
did
hear
get a
about
new
it frequently.
shed. It's a nice.
You're proud of
shed.
the shed,
I'm
I'm
very
sure.
proud of very proud of the man shed. And I've been working on bringing electricity into it and insulating it, and it's not exciting work by any of the stretch of the imagination. I'm not using technology a lot. Most of the time, I just have my music off,
Right.
and I'm just doing the thing. It's not exciting. I don't want to say it's. I guess for me, I really truly enjoy the simplicity of it. I don't know if that's.
Well, it's not
Is
fast
it?
paced, but it's
Yeah,
meaningful.
it's meaningful.
I think
So I
that's what you're kind
guess
of tapping into.
that wouldn't really necessarily be a boredom thing, would it?
I wouldn't say it's a boredom thing, but it probably seems boring because
I'm not looking at a screen.
you're looking at a screen. You're
Yeah.
not being stimulated somehow, with what you're hearing.
I think it forces me. For me, I guess it kind of forces me to slow down a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the information I intake is minimal compared to doom scrolling.
True. And
You know?
doom scrolling never ends. That's why it's called doom scrolling.
Oh,
Obviously,
it's the
There's
worst.
you always think you're going to get to the end of your
It really
feed,
truly is.
and it just keeps feeding you more.
It is kind of an addiction, is it? Because
It
you
is.
keep on seeing all these stories and all these things that you're
Yeah.
not interested in. You're like, where's that fix? Where's
Yep.
that one thing that's gonna give me that boost of juice
Yep.
in my brain
Yeah.
to get me excited again? That's the worst.
So for the purposes of our discussion, or what we're talking about, what is really boredom?
Yeah.
And sometimes, like you said, it's important to put a definition to it because, like you said, you're working on your shed and getting it all set up.
That's exciting.
It
to
was
me.
boring, but it wasn't necessarily a state of boredom, right?
Yeah.
So boredom is really a state of what we would say low arousal and dissatisfaction, and that's kind of where the brain craves stimulation but doesn't find any. Okay.
Sure.
And so you can kind of see how social media and our electronic devices and Netflix and streaming services and all that stuff have kind of worked really hard to eliminate boredom because our first response when we experience boredom is that we need it to go away. And it's uncomfortable for us. Sometimes a lot of times it's very uncomfortable for us as human beings, particularly in our fast-paced society, to sit in that boredom for any length of time because a lot of us get anxious.
Right.
I wouldn't say we have anxiety about it, but we get anxious as if we should be doing something. We're trying to move on to the next thing. I was looking at some of the research because I tend to be a little bit of a nerd when it comes to this stuff. But there's a psychologist. His name is Dr. John Eastwood, and he asserts that boredom arises when we struggle to find meaning in what we're doing. So boredom isn't necessarily the doing nothing. It's not finding meaning in what you're doing in the moment. That's one way to look at it.
Sure. Feels like you're wasting time.
Right. The perception of it.
Okay.
Yep, perhaps. Or just we don't find what we're doing meaningful.
Right. Okay.
So you'll find, when people say, well, my job is so boring. the tasks may be menial, but what they're tapping into is they don't find that their work as perhaps contributing to something worthwhile or meaningful.
Sure. Okay.
The research also finds that boredom actually serves a functional role in our lives, meaning boredom tends to signal that our current activity lacks value. At least we perceive that the activity we're engaging in lacks value, and that prompts us to explore, to innovate.
Oh, sure.
Okay. So that's kind of what the research would say about boredom. There's other implications about how our brain functions relative to boredom. I like to say that boredom encourages us to do what's called mind wandering, which is a feature of planning or problem solving, where when you're bored and you have nothing to do, your brain automatically starts to look for solutions to problems or to generate new ideas. It's kind of our natural inclination to do that. And what happens is whenever we try to fill those pockets of boredom in our lives with something else, it kind of shuts off that creativity switch and doesn't allow our brain to use its creative processes to develop new ideas or solutions.
Because it's already detected that, hey, I'm doing something that's
Correct.
fun and exciting.
Yep, you've already
Okay.
filled the board space
Right.
with something that.
So
often
why
may
should
be-
it work?
Yeah.
To end that boredom.
Right.
then? That makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. So how does boredom fuel creativity? I think that's important to kind of talk about to some extent. There is a researcher from the University of Central Lancashire.
Where's Lancashire?
I don't know. I didn't look up the address. Sorry. I think it's in the European Union. I think.
It does not sound American.
Yeah. Yep. Anyway, the researcher's name is Sandy Mann, and what that researcher found is that
Sandman?
the Sandman,
Sandman?
Sandy Mann. Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Seriously. People forced into boredom. They did a research study in that they had people do a very meaningless task, a boring task, and that task that they did was they had the participants copy numbers. So they gave them a big sheet of paper with numbers on it. They had them just copy down the
Oh
numbers,
gosh.
one after the other.
Yeah. No.
It's kind of like the punishment in schools back in the day where you had to write a statement like 100 times, like I will not throw
put tax on
spitballs at the teacher. I will not throw spitballs at the teacher. They have to do that 200 times or something, But similar situation.
Right.
So they had people copy numbers for an extended period of time. What they found is people forced into boredom later performed better on creative tasks. So what the assertion is, they don't know why, but what they're kind of asserting is that being in a state of boredom kind of primes the brain to perform better on creativity based tasks later.
So if you are a creative person and you're not being creative and you're not getting those creative juices flowing that you would like, do something intensely boring.
Give yourself space to do nothing is kind of what it's alluding to, if that makes sense.
And just sit
and that it gives your brain the space to, for lack of better terms, breathe a little bit.
I suppose it's kind of like if you have when you have your browser up on your laptop, and you just keep on adding tabs, and all of a sudden your computer just kind of stops working very well.
Yeah.
Well, it's because it's overloaded, overstimulated. You just gotta purge it and start over.
Yep. But we've all had moments.
Yeah.
Exactly. We've all had moments where we have great ideas or good insights that come to us when we're not engaged somehow. We're not engaged in focused work. So that's the eureka moment in the shower, right?
Shower thoughts.
Why does that happen? Well, it's because in the shower you're doing something that's obviously necessary, but it's mundane and it's not very creative. And so your brain the task you're doing is on autopilot. You don't need to think very hard about it. And that frees up your brain to use its creative processes to come up with ideas.
Right.
And so that's why that concept of mind wandering, like boredom, encourages that mind wandering. And mind wandering then kind of creates those breakthrough moments, you may say, or those big idea moments.
Yeah.
That's why boredom is a lot of times important.
Sure.
That makes sense. The other idea about boredom is this idea of the incubation effect.
What's that?
What that is, psychologists call the incubation effect, or researchers say that the incubation effect is you're looking. You ever had those situations where you're working on a problem, trying to solve it, or trying to develop a solution for an issue that you're facing, and you just, no matter how hard you work, you can't figure it out. But when you step away from the problem, hours later, you'll come up with an idea about how to solve it.
Just kind of shows up.
That's kind of the incubation effect. Is your brain takes the problem in, may not be able to come up with a solution right now, but unconscious processing often results in more novel solutions. So even though we're not consciously thinking about a problem that we're trying to solve, if we step away from that problem, our brain is still processing it. There's this whole, and we could talk for hours about this, our subconscious mind. But our subconscious mind is always working, and what we have to remember is that the brain is an incredibly powerful computing organism.
So
and it's constantly working, even though we're not consciously thinking about it.
So the first little thing I was thinking about is like I forget what movie it's from, but like there's this little guy just kind of doing his own little thing by himself, just working away.
Mm-hmm.
So is there like a little man, a little person in our brain, or our named subconscious is always kind of like, oh wow, you gave me this information that I don't know what to do with. Well, let me just work on this while you go do your thing. And
I don't think there's a little person in your head, John. Maybe you have one, but
little green man.
We call that schizophrenia. But
oh,
anyway,
okay.
No. What really?
That's kind of sometimes
our
what
brains,
it seems like, because it's like the way I see it, like you don't think about something for a while, then all of a sudden it just pops up. Like, well, for me, a lot of like whenever I'm thinking, it's like got to be active thinking, or like it's like something that I'm intentionally doing, and if you have like your subconscious working on it for you. So let's I mean, I know it may not be actually working for you. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But it's like you come up with those ideas when you're not thinking about it. It's like, wow, who the heck was that helped me out with that?
Think about right now. So your brain is always working. Like just because something's not consciously in your thoughts doesn't mean it's not there. So if you think about right now we're focusing on what we're talking about as we're recording this podcast. But at the same time, your brain is also processing a bunch of other information that you're not even aware of. It's making sure you're breathing. It's making sure your eyes blink when they need to, that kind of thing. Sure. Even like this morning when you're getting ready, you probably went through an entire routine getting ready this morning and you never gave it a thought.
I had no idea how I got downstairs.
Yeah, that's how
happened.
That's how our subconscious brain works. Right. It's constantly functioning. And so it's constantly processing information even when we're not consciously aware of it.
Interesting.
It's fascinating how it does work. Yeah. But kind of these boredom-driven, what we call breakthroughs, in history, there's been a lot of examples of those. We're all aware of Albert Einstein, of course. He was known for taking long walks and violin breaks, he would call them. So did you know he played the violin?
I did.
Yeah.
Did you also know he was a comedian?
I can't imagine Albert Einstein being that funny, but maybe he was.
He was apparently he had a lot of dry humor.
I bet he did.
Yeah.
But I bet it wouldn't over a lot of people's heads though. He was so smart.
Probably.
But he said often said that his ideas came during his non-work moments, and so he intentionally set up time for himself to get away from the rat race, so to speak, of the time, by going on long walks and playing the violin. And that's when a lot of his ideas came. And then he used his work time to actually work on those ideas that he developed. So now I want you to think about back when Albert Einstein was around. I don't think they had cell phones. I don't think they did.
No.
But he was saying how difficult it was to have focus time for creativity. So imagine what nowadays, we're fighting
what would
against.
he do? What would they do? They'd be like, what the heck, guys?
Which is kind of an example of how full our lives are of a lot of times unnecessary stimulation.
Yeah.
And it makes it much more difficult because there's always something to grab our attention.
Almost would make sense to do a technology purge at some point and just take a week off or a couple.
There are
days
people that
off,
do technology fasts for an extended period of time. They go off grid.
That's gotta feel so good.
They'll tell you the first couple of days are horrible because we don't realize how habitual it is for us to fill the board space.
It's like a twitch. It's
it's like
become like a twitch almost.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And So we have Albert Einstein. Another example is you look at Isaac Newton. He discovered gravity when he was isolated on a family farm back in 1665. He wasn't at work. Um, if an apple fell on his head while he was walking to work, it probably wouldn't have occurred to him. But his theory of gravity began when he was by himself on a family farm. I'm sure there's more to it than that, but if you look at just that context, that's an example.
Right. He's sitting there pondering, and the
Yeah.
apple falls on his head.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Did the apple actually fall on his head?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe.
It's kind of like chicken or the egg.
Right.
Which one?
And then, do you know who Agatha Christie is?
I've heard.
She's an author.
Okay.
I'll spare you.
I've heard of the name a lot.
She's an author, and
Is she the alphabet one?
I don't know. You're putting me on the spot. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But she said that the best time to plot a murder mystery was while doing the dishes.
She wants to murder whoever's not doing the dishes.
Well, probably she wanted to murder her kids for not doing the dishes. But my point is, she was engaging in a task that she didn't have to think very hard about.
Sure.
And that freed her brain to think about other things. So, so the problem we're now left with, John, is that we've really lost boredom in our modern life.
I hate being bored. I hate it.
You look at our forum, you look at our phones, you look at TikTok, you look at even podcasts and emails.
Right.
We're always trying to hijack our attention.
Yeah.
We don't like sitting and just doing and just being. We always feel like we have to be consuming something. And that's really because we don't feel it's that modern overstimulation that has kind of killed our ability to tolerate boredom for any length of time.
Yeah.
And like I said before, we often avoid the boredom because it surfaces kind of uncomfortable thoughts or anxiety. Sometimes the most difficult person to wrestle with is ourselves. And if we're bored, we're left with ourselves.
Right.
But the problem is if we don't allow ourselves to, quote, be bored, we have several problems. That research has shown that there's several issues. We have increased anxiety. And what I mean by that is, it sounds like I'm contradicting myself because before I just said we avoid boredom because it causes anxiety. Mm-hmm. But if we don't get comfortable sitting with the anxiousness that we feel, the nervousness that we feel, doing nothing, it's just going to cause that to get worse when it does happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The thing that you avoid is the thing you start to fear more over time, because it kind of creates this monster that we can't wrestle with. Research has also shown that as information and as stimulation has become more and more accessible through devices and whatnot, the shorter our attention spans have been. And that's been shown in especially in the younger generations, is difficulties with inattention, particularly in like the classroom, continue to rise.
Right.
And it's not because we all have ADHD all of a sudden. It's because we haven't learned how to function in that board space.
How to handle the technology responsibly.
Yeah.
Too.
Yep.
That's a big thing.
Yep.
I noticed when I try to step away from news or X, which is where I get a lot of my news and a lot of the gossip, to be honest. I mean, it's a lot of crazy stuff going on there.
Well, news is not news anymore. Meaning, like, for us,
it's instant.
Right. No, what I mean is, it is instant. It's a 24-hour news cycle. But we find just news boring. What I mean by that is, it used to be we just read a newspaper and read the story, like, oh, well, that's interesting. It's good to know. But no, we want the news story and all the comments.
I will say, yes. I will say I always, whenever I'm on X, I always look at the comments more than anything else.
Yep.
Because I want to hear what the public square has to say.
Exactly. Which is helpful.
Right.
It's interesting, but we've lost the ability just to kind of take it at face value and to kind of think for ourselves in a way.
What I was also going to say is like when I do an X fast where I'm just not on it for an afternoon, then I go on it the next day, I'm like, holy smokes, what did I miss? I can't do that again because there's so much that has happened that we've all been, that's been right there. I feel like I missed out on something, and which is it really going to change my life in any meaningful way? Absolutely not.
Well, it's interesting how the
We have to get that severe
Yeah.
FOMO.
Well, it's weird how our concept of news has shifted. Like
Yeah.
if you look back at World War II, um, we would like you look at the D-Day invasion, the Normandy Beach invasion,
Yeah.
D-Day. They didn't hear about that until hours after, or even the next
Yeah.
day. Whereas
Right.
now we would hear about it instantly, and we would be observing it in real time,
Right.
right? And so it's just our expectation for how we get our news and how we get our information has shifted dramatically.
Right.
And so we're constantly chasing, and you can see that on the news networks. They're constantly chasing the next story, the next
Because you got to
scoop, the
try to
next
keep up
break, because they got to
somehow.
keep up and keep
Right.
people coming in. So, and that's kind of that gets back to this idea of modern overstimulation. The
Yeah.
constant channel surfing, the instantaneous streaming of a TV show.
That reminds me. One thing I really miss about Netflix is when they used to have the DVDs.
Ah, yeah. Bring some of it back, yeah.
Like. I mean, sure, the streaming is great. You have
Yeah.
everything at your fingertips, but man, there was an art to arranging that list
The
of your
DVD queue. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember that.
Do you
Yeah.
want to get 1, 2, 3, or 4 discs? I mean, if you're a real baller, I think they had like a 5 disc
I think
at
they
a
did,
time
yeah.
one. And
Yep.
man, it was I loved it because it was the joy of the hunt. I would
Yeah.
see like, oh, that's a weird movie because I'm certainly not going to watch 4 mainstream movies
Right.
in a week or anything so I'm going to find
Yeah.
some obscure ones. And then now Netflix is chock full of obscure ones, and
Yeah.
it's right at your fingertips. And there's no fun in going through my list because I didn't really have to curate it.
Yeah. Well, and there's no fun of being able to run to the refrigerator during commercial breaks anymore either.
Shoot, yeah.
You know?
What the heck?
Yeah.
Gotta go for that potty break, or go get another bowl of ice cream or popcorn.
Yeah. So
Whatever.
we can kind of, it's okay. I can sit here and make fun of how we're not bored anymore, but it's not helpful if we don't provide kind of, well, how do you
Right.
reclaim boredom, so to speak?
Right.
And this is where people may wonder if I've gone off my rocker because I'm advocating that we take time to be bored. And if you talk to I should say most productivity experts, they all have their own frameworks, they all have their own ways of doing things, but most of them tend to follow the same formula. They all say you should prioritize what you're going to do in a day, do the hardest things first, do what's in your priority for the day, and then move on to the next thing. But then all of them will also say it's to some way, shape, or form. You need to take a time during the week to review and reflect. And so they all kind of build in that, quote, boredom piece. Because when you're reflecting, you're not really working on anything.
Right.
You're looking back and considering what you've done and then using that information to plan forward. So a lot of the productivity experts today have built in like that time for, quote, boredom. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's really important, I think, to kind of build in or reclaim boredom in our lives. And there's kind of 3, I call them micro practices that you can use. These are real rockets. These are rocket science. I mean, nobody's ever heard of these.
I'm
before.
really interested in hearing these.
Yes,
Josh.
no one has ever considered
Is it
doing
good?
this.
Never before done?
This is breaking brand new
Revolutionary.
information. It's revolutionary.
Got it. Okay, let's hear them.
First one is a boredom walk. So here's the deal. You go home.
Go home.
Say hi to your family, of course. If you
Yeah.
have a family home.
Right.
And then you walk. You change. You put on some comfortable clothes. You walk out the
Walking
door.
clothes, maybe.
Yep.
Okay.
And put on some comfortable shoes, and you go for a walk.
No way.
Yeah.
Shut up.
It's a boredom walk. It's not just a walk. It's a boredom walk.
With headphones on, right? Listen to
No.
podcasts. And
No,
listen
actually,
to music.
that's the key with the boredom walk is you're not no music, no phone, nothing. Just go for a walk and let your mind
What
wander.
about my smartwatch to catch my steps?
No, John, leave your smartwatch at home. That's for training.
Okay.
For training, okay. But in all seriousness, I think
Sounds really nice.
a lot of people do go for walks, obviously. But that's being intentional about when you go for a walk and then not allowing yourself to have that constant stimulation while you're walking.
It's so rejuvenating.
Yeah.
It really is refreshing to not have your phone
Yeah.
with you, or even have your phone with you, but just like don't even look at it. You know, just leave it.
When
So empowering.
often rather than a walk, if I'm crunched for time or something, I need to get a workout in, I'll go for a run, but I just won't have any headphones on or anything. And that's actually for me, it's harder than going for a walk because
You're working.
you're working and
You're working
you're
hard.
fighting
Yeah.
you're fighting the fact that you hate what you're doing to yourself in the moment.
Major
So
props to you for doing your
yeah.
walk for running, Josh, on a regular basis. I just will not do it. I put my foot down.
You put your foot down.
I put
You
my
refuse?
I put my time in for cross country when I was in high school. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. Anyways,
So here's another one. I call it the 5-minute stare, and that's where you sit for 5 minutes. I'm just asking people to sit for 5 minutes every day and do absolutely nothing.
AKA
No input,
meditation.
no fidgets, nothing.
No fidgets.
No fidgeting, nothing. Just sit and observe. And 5 minutes doesn't sound like a long time, but 5 minutes is a very long time to sit and do absolutely nothing.
Right.
So I would challenge people to give that a try just to see what it's like. But the other thing I would really encourage people to do is that I call it tech-free transition times. You know, we have all these transition times, and kind of what I was alluding to earlier is it used to be before cell phones and all the advent of technology and even TV screens that are posted everywhere now. We used to have these transition times that would give us a brain break, so to speak. But we don't have that anymore. So when we're in the line at the grocery store, for example, if we ever wait in line, because now we just have it brought out to us on the curb, right, at Walmart or Target. But if you're waiting in line, fight that urge to pull out your phone. If you're at a dance recital, I think you have a dance recital this weekend. But if you're at a dance recital waiting for it to start, don't pull out your phone.
Are you gonna come watch me dance, Josh?
Maybe.
Yeah, watch
Maybe.
the parent dance.
Maybe.
It's gonna be amazing.
But
No, I would
if you
not.
look, so what you should do, is just and I do this all the time. It just fascinates me. If you're waiting for something to start, like a dance recital, look around and see the number of people that have their nose down on their phones the whole time. You know,
Right.
and years ago, those used to be excellent transition times where you could build relationships or just sit and reflect on things.
Right.
But we don't do that anymore. Every
Right.
single moment of our time has to be filled. So I would encourage people to have the tech-free transition times as well. Not all the time, but just once in a while.
And I guarantee you, your mind and body will thank you
Right.
for that.
Right.
That's so important.
So anyway, I would just encourage people, as we're kind of wrapping it up here, I want people to think about how often do we really try to escape boredom, and rather than needing to fill that void all the time, give yourself permission to kind of sit in the boredom and do nothing for a while.
Maybe
Just
let's
sit in the
just look
stillness.
forward to
Yeah.
being bored sometimes.
Yep. Yep.
Life moves too fast, anyways.
Right.
Let's slow it down just a little bit.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So last thing I want to leave people is only an idle mind knows what it truly wants. I'll leave that for people to think on.
That's a good ponder.
Yeah.
Nothing else to be said after that.
Nothing else to be said. That's all I
I
got.
think we're good. Let's wrap it up then.
Let's wrap it up.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the nonStatic podcast. If you'd like to stay connected and dive deeper into finding peace, focus, and fulfillment, and learning how to be okay and look forward to boredom,
Yeah.
be sure to sign up for Josh's nonstatic newsletter at nonstatic.org. And always remember, if you or someone you know is struggling with their mental health, we are here to help. Reach out to us anytime at Inspire Services. And take care, keep moving forward, and enjoy being bored.
And enjoy the journey.
Yes.